Всем добрый день, добрый вечер уже. Я надеюсь, меня слышно и видно. Сегодня у нас последний воркшоп из серии 5 воркшопов по PBL. И вот кто подсоединился заранее, наверное, заметили, мы еще обсуждали геймификацию образования, об этом как-нибудь потом еще поговорим обязательно. Это уже отдельный такой топик, который стоит изучить всем учителям. Итак, PBL, Day 5. John, I'm giving the stage to you, and I'll be moderating the comments in the background. So let's go.
Okay, great. I am actually finding the handout from... So one of the things I've been sharing, the link, first of all, good afternoon, everybody. It's great to have you back here. And this is day 5 for project-based learning. And so we're going to be talking about how to manage the project. Once you have the project built, how do you make sure that it runs smoothly, both as a teacher, but also for your students? And one of the links I've been sharing every day of this week has been to this Google Doc with this link right here. And I just want to have you take a look really quickly, because lots of resources that we're talking about. The first section has my main page with all the questions and information from all the speakers from this week. But beneath that are the readings that I've been asking you to do as a result of our session. So today is going to be this session right here. And then there are some resources, including the PBL template for you to complete and create your own experience. And then the next page, you have a wealth of resources that you can use to deepen your understanding of project-based learning. And then the last thing is a nice tool to meet with your teachers, your colleagues, to get feedback about your project idea. So lots of resources there for you. So as we move forward, again, here's that link to the Google Doc, and I encourage you to look through it and to use those resources. So one of the reasons why I'm asking this question is that, project-based learning is kind of like having a superpower, because for students, because you're giving them the opportunity to take the lead in their learning, to make decisions that could eventually contribute to the community. And that's impactful. That's something that students don't normally get. And there's a certain excitement or exhilaration or energy that students get from that experience. And so as we continue on this day, let's revisit our norms. Everyone contributing deepens everyone's learning. Pay attention to self and others. Listen intently with one whole self and ask questions. This is the last day, so for a live conversation. So if you've got questions, especially if you've been attending some or all the sessions this week, or maybe you've been attending some of the sessions of my colleagues this week about various topics of innovation that fit into STEM PBL. This is the time to ask questions to make those connections that you're looking for. So this is going to be an important time for that. And today is the last day, so this is where we finally find that answer, or a answer, because there's more than one, of how do we engage students in real world exploration through PBL. This is what has been our pathway. And again, I'm John McCarthy, and I'm facilitating this with you. And I have been very active in project-based learning. And my passion, of course, is student voice, which is why, I have this book on differentiation is one example. But if you're interested in some of the things I've talked about, like assessment fog, and you want to find more articles that I've written, you just go to this link right here, and it will take you there. So let's review and reflect what we did yesterday, because yesterday was pretty energetic with the conversations and questions about assessment. And so just some key things. First and foremost, traditional assessments work in PBL. You're going to use those traditional assessments. As long as they're high quality and they're accurate and clean, they're going to be very useful. So you'll continue to do that. It's just that as we do this, we need to make sure that we are taking care of other things. So when we do assessments, there's going to be individual and group, but the group is going to be around global professional skills, like the 4 C's: collaboration, communication, creativity, and critical thinking. You could do lots of group assessments around that and self-reflections. Academic assessments are also going to happen, and academic assessments should be individual. In fact, there should be no group grade. That was the big opener that we did yesterday, is that all assessments must be individual, because otherwise it creates assessment fog, where you give a group grade and some of the kids didn't do all the work, and so they get credit of knowing something that they really don't know, and the grade will reflect that, and it creates problems for you later on when you're trying to track their growth and what their needs are. So when we do academic, the way we help clear up assessment fog is we focus on what's on the left for grading purposes, and the logistics there on the right, those are things that we can coach them on, but we do not give or take points for, because they have no connection to your standards for your curriculum your curriculum outcomes. So why are we assessing that, or why are we mixing those points into our grade? I mean, we can assess those, but we need to keep it as a separate assessment that does not count towards the course grade. And to do that, we need to think about academic criteria is the qualitative expectations, not quantitative, but qualitative. What's the quality that we're looking for aligned to our curriculum? And then along with what are some formative feedback checkpoints so we can track their progress is what we're looking to do. And this is just an example of looking at taking a presentation, what we should be assessing on the left, what we should not be assessing on the right. Or at least if we want to assess what's on the right, we keep it as a separate category, and we don't mix those points into their academic score. Of course, as we talked before, presentations by itself are not really effective alone in terms of doing assessment, at least the traditional ones that happen. And we went into that. You can watch the video and look at that section. And then we talked about rubrics, and that rubrics need to have more criteria and explanation, that they should not be quantitative. They should not be vague for assumptions. So what we see here is the black is the key language for progression, and then the red gives the qualification, the explanation that separates each level from each other and gives concrete language. And that's the important part, the specific and concrete language of what we're looking for, so that students know what to monitor themselves as they are developing their products. And then we have a rubric on rubrics that can be used. So there are a lot of ways to really just improve our assessments so that they're clean for project-based learning, and also even for non-projects. So when we talk about projects, there are, when you think about the documents that are needed, this is a short list of documents that you're going to accumulate for a project. Now, this list may seem to sound like, wow, this is a long list. But if you think about a really good unit it's going to have most, if not all of these as well. It's just something that it's important to develop, piece by piece, to make sure you have what you need. Especially for a project, the last 6 bullets are going to be really important for the management component. So this is an image I showed you on the first day of example of what a difference between a project and a traditional unit. And you'll see now that with a project, when we're trying to manage, we have the launch, and then you have a variety of different types of work and tasks that happen. And those work and tasks some things will be teacher-centered. Most of it eventually should be student-centered and student-led. And then you use those benchmarks, I call them milestones or even checkpoints, along the ways to track their growth, as well as for students to monitor and track their growth and their progress logistically and academically in getting the work done. So these are things. So how do we do this? That's going to be our focus. So one of our important things we want to do is what we do in the first 5 to 7 days of the project, how you launch these key things. And for example, you have your call to action. So that's going to be your entry event, your driving question should happen within the first day. You give the entry, you launch the entry event, you give them the driving question. And then you do something that's called a need to know, which is like a KWL, where after you've given students the end in mind, you have them generate questions. Well, first of all, generate what they already know about the topic, either the real world topic or in the skills themselves. And then what questions do they have to explore more? So if you're doing inquiry, this is a great way to launch your inquiry approach. And then within the first couple of days, you're going to announce the final product or performance. Now, the only exception to that is if you're doing a deep inquiry approach where you want them to unpack what that end is going to be, then you wouldn't. But if that's not the case, we tell them at the end, then you're going to create this presentation for the community about what are good, healthy eating habits and how you can grow your own indoor garden. Okay, that's our focus. So now we know what we got to prepare for. These things are really important. So the other piece about this is that, you're going to make team assignments, and we're going to go through some of these things. So it's important to form the teams for the students, and then you're going to have contracts and what we call the mediation plan, which we're going to talk about. These are guides to help the students think through how to best move forward, how the best to work together. And then you're constantly going to be reviewing your need to knows, because as questions get answered from the students' lists of their KWLs, then you'll share those answers with the students. And then you're going to do team builders and establish norms. Those two things are very important, because the team builders is a way for students to practice the 21st century skills, the global professional skills. And norms is a way to empower students to monitor and manage each other. So as we think about these ideas, during the learning process, as you're conducting PBL, these are some key areas that you would be working on. So there is, when you think about instruction, you're going to do whole group, small group, individual. This kind of depends on the situation, but you can have a mix of that. And it's important that students have choices and opportunities to have voice to make decisions themselves. Early in the project, this might be small choices, and then later in the project, it's bigger choices. Formative assessments, we talked about yesterday about how important that is, that it's clear. And so you have those academic checkpoints and learning check-ins. So academic checkpoints might be things you assess to see that there's growth in certain areas that students need to have in skills and content before moving forward. Learning check-ins are ways to see where support needs to take place and to differentiate. And learning check-ins are not necessarily going to be graded. You're going to have, and you look on the right-hand side, you have facilitated learning, which are going to be protocols, how you use protocols to support student learning. And this is going to be a really important piece to do. There's lots of different protocols, and I've shared several in the Google Doc for your purposes. There's also authentic learning experiences, where students are going to engage in real, authentic conversations with experts, community members, their target audience, around what they're shaping or solving or explaining that's a real-world need as they learn their skill sets to do that. And it's really important to create something like this, a checklist, a schedule that you helps teach students how to manage their time. Because students don't magically know how to do this well unless we give them some structures. Some students do know, and we leave them alone. But the ones who don't have that understanding, that structure, are going to need something like this where they can fill in their time and date when they're going to do the work. You've given them how much time it will probably take to accomplish. You've given them due dates. Those are your check-ins with them. And then they check off in the last column when they say they've completed it. So if they check it off and it's not complete, in your opinion, that's a coaching conversation you can have with them, help them get better at it. And if you have checklists are very important, but it's important to chunk them. So you'll see I have the shaded areas so that when students look at this, rather than thinking, oh my gosh, I have 8 things to do, there's so much I got to get done. Instead, they think, oh, I have 3 chunks I need to complete. Let me start in the first chunk and just focus on that, get it done before I worry about the second chunk. And this helps differentiate and organize ideas so that it supports students in thinking how best to organize their time and getting the work done. And then when you look at the last day of your PBL unit, when everything is completed, the presentations or the publication has taken place, then it's really important to get feedback from your students about the PBL unit, about their experience. It could be a survey, it could be a focus group conversation with them where they share what did they like about it, what do they like about the experience, have them be specific, constructive, and kind. What do they wonder about the unit? Like maybe there's some things they thought was problematic or they just weren't sure about, so they share those things. And then what are the suggestions they have to make this unit or the experience even better? And as a teacher, you take notes on this and then you use those notes to revise this PBL unit for the next time that you launch it. And it's possible some of the ideas students give about management you can use immediately in your next unit. So just kind of talk about a couple of different things. So I said that it's important to have protocols, and the purpose of protocols in this case is how can we empower students to take the lead and give them the guidance and structure to do that. So one protocol is called the gallery walk. And in the gallery walk, what happens is that students are, they post their work, and this work is not the final work. It could be, but it's their draft because they want to get feedback. So the draft work is either posted up on the walls, or if it's done virtually, you would set this up, say, in a Google folder or Google Slides, or if you're using Microsoft, you can use OneNote or OneDrive. I mean, there's a lot of different tools where you basically have it posted up virtually where students can now look at it. And then what students do is either individually or in groups. So if you're doing this virtually in groups, you would put students into breakout rooms. So they're in their group with their team, and they all have access to the same links to look at the products. And what they do is they're going to give feedback. And the feedback is going to start with these starter stems: I like, I wonder, and what if. So I like is, what do you see that's working, that's accurate, that's strong? I wonder are about, so you might say, I like how this person has a very good introduction to their piece, or I like how the imagery really reflects the ideas. I wonder is about where you are looking and you think there's a potential gap or issue. It may not be, but in your opinion, you think you might see something. So you're going to share it, and it's up to the author to decide if they're going to do that. So an example would be, I wonder if there's more detail that's needed to explain your point. I wonder if maybe some of the images could be more clearly aligned to the big topic. What if is where you make suggestions. And so again, the way these stems are all invitational. They feel invitational to the person who's receiving the feedback. So for example, what if you were to add more detail in your conclusion to match what you say in your introduction? What if you could use images that have a marine life theme in your presentation because it aligns best with your concepts? So there's a lot of different ways you can use the gallery walk in that way. And so when we think about this, I also want to share, I think I've shared this before. I want to share with you more examples of protocols that really invite students to do this. Let me just find it here. Here we go. I'm going to stop sharing for a moment, and then I'm going to share a different page so you can see what I'm talking about. All right. So this is my my own website where I keep lots of resources that I curate for free for all educators. So this is about collaboration is learning, like how do we help students be better collaborators? And there's lots of information in these links above. But if you go to the last link, application strategies, it brings you to these curated 4 categories of basically protocols to support students in their thinking and learning, whether you're having them practice communication, giving feedback, which we just talked about, deep thinking and reflection, or helping them improve their reading understanding of the readings you give them. So if I go to feedback protocol, click that, I will see there's a variety of strategies that I can use. Gallery walk is one of them. So this is a place that I encourage you to go to, and I'm going to pop the link into our chat. So you now have access to this. All right, let me go back to the slide deck. Where's my slide deck? Oh, there it is. Didn't recognize it. Okay. So those are examples of protocols that you can do that are, again, the purpose of protocols is they give a very specific step-by-step of what, so that the students can follow those steps independently without the teacher taking the lead. It eliminates the teacher voice and puts forward the student voice. So students learn how to lead while learning the content that you want them to work on. Here's another strategy. This is usually done in index cards, but can also be done in a form, a virtual digital form, where you have students share information about themselves. So we're really going to focus on this bigger square, because what we want is we want to know 3 or 4 things students are interested in. We want to know different ways that they process information. So we don't want to put them in one category like your audio, your visual, but because they're a combination of multiple categories. This is something I talk about in So All Can Learn. And then in the bottom left-hand column are a list of academic skills. We want them to rate themselves on a 1 to 4, an even number, because if it's not even number, like a 1 to 5, they'll say they're a 3 because they don't want to stand out. 1 even number so that we can see if they rate themselves in the top half or the bottom half, because that speaks to confidence. And you describe these in student-friendly language. So once they complete this data, you collect these and you can use these to form groups, as well as to determine what type of activities you're going to have based upon what most kids are interested in, for example. You can, when you form groups, if you need to make sure you have someone who's very confident in math or reading, you can make sure that each group has someone like that who self-selected that. And when you form teams, it's important that the students get a role description for each of the roles on the team, and then let them use those roles descriptions to decide who on the team is going to take which role. Now, people always ask me, like, where do you find the names of roles? And there's different places. I mean, you can go to, I'll come back to it. I can't think of it. But what I do is I like to make them up. I use things like leadership titles like manager or editor, and then I add the topic. So project managers are going to manage the calendar and the timelines. The print editor is the person who's responsible for monitoring the team's conversations or check-ins about their writing. So this editor is not going to do the writing, but facilitate and lead the conversation, the team conversation around how they're all doing with their writing. The research editor is going to make sure that everyone it's going to facilitate the conversation to make sure everyone is doing their research accurately. And if someone's struggling, then they get assistance from the team. The media editor is because if we're going to be doing a video production, then it's their job to make sure that all the parts are everyone's taking care of their parts so that they're ready for that piece. They're not actually doing the entire video themselves. They're leading that process. So that's what's key about this. Literature circles, that's the name that I was trying to think of when people say, hey, where do you find names of titles? Hold on, let me click in here. So if you do some Google searching, you can find some titles there. This is one of my favorites because this was something I found from visiting a variety of PBL schools in the US. There's one organization called the New Tech Network where I saw in many of their schools, they had something like this. And I just made some adaptations to it. They call it the firing clause. I call it the mediation clause because it serves the same purpose, but the title gives a better sense to students. But the purpose here is, when you think about when student teams are not working well and they're not getting along with each other, think about who usually has to solve the problem. Who's got to fix the problem for the team? And I just realized I posted literature circles in the wrong channel. Let me change the channel here. There we go. Yeah, it's usually the teacher. Absolutely. And so the problem about that is that when the teacher is the first step of defense, then students are not learning how to collaborate. They might be experiencing it, but they're not learning. And so this protocol is one that you teach the students so that the teacher doesn't step in until the third step. And it works really well. So what happens is, when there's a problem, the students have to have a one-to-one meeting with the student who's struggling. And the goal is always, let's find a solution that's going to help us work as a team. So they meet with that student and then whatever they agree on, they try. And if it fails, they have to meet at least 2 or 3 times. Now, when you first do this type of protocol, as a teacher, you might have to facilitate the conversation, but not participate. Do not participate. You're just facilitating, guiding, coaching them as they have their conversation. Now, let's say they try 2 or 3 times and they come up with solutions and it doesn't work. So now the next step is a team meeting with the student. And so they do it this way because the reason step 1 is so the student doesn't feel ganged up on, but if we tried it one-to-one and it's not working, now we're going to try as a whole team. The team might talk about how the student's lack of work or effort, how it's impacting them, and how they genuinely want to find a solution that works for the student and the team. So they come up with a solution, that's the whole purpose, and they try it. And if it works, great. If it doesn't work, we go to step 3. Step 3 is where the teachers actually participates. And the teacher's going to know all the steps that have happened so far. And this is where, with the teacher, the team works out the problem, comes up with a solution, and we try that. If that doesn't work, we get to step 4. In many cases, the student is removed from the team by the teacher. Now, sometimes the teacher will ask the team to decide for themselves. Do you want this student removed from the team? They might say no. They might say yes. You ask the student, do you want to be removed from the team? If either group says, yes, I don't want to be part of the team, or we don't want them part of the team, then that person's off the team. And then they work on their own. Now, I can tell you, for where this is done, there are far fewer students who get removed from the team. Some do, but many students actually work out a solution within the first 3 steps. They work it out. And that's what we want them to do. We want them to be empowered on how to work things out. So that's what this is good for. This link you see will take you to an article that explains in more depth. So if you want to look at that, feel free. So I want to talk about this last strategy, and this strategy is very important. It's huge. It's a non-negotiable. It's something you must do with your students, because what it does is it makes the entire unit transparent to kids. It helps them know what exactly you, the teacher, are trying to do with them and where you're trying to go. In fact, this particular strategy is something you can establish even when you're not doing a project. Oftentimes, when it's not with a project, it's just called a student learning wall as opposed to a project wall. And so these are the important components that you would have. And so what you do is you post this up. So if you're in a classroom, you post this up in the classroom so students can see it, so they know what's in there in the project. I'm going to show you some examples in a bit. If it's virtual, you can literally have this in a Google Doc or a Word doc or whatever type of virtual space you have, where they can see the links and explanations. So when you look at it, here are just some examples, and the key is that the driving question should be huge in a classroom. It should be the size of a banner so that students can really see it no matter where they're sitting. Now it's virtual. That's probably easier because that should be like the header for all your project documents is your driving question, because that is the focus of the entire project. And you'll see in these are just some examples. My critique of this is the project on the right. The driving question is in such small language words that it's hard to see, and there's not a calendar. This is another example. Project walls or student learning walls can be as big as this is. It can also fit on one chart paper. So if you worry about space, it could be on one chart paper. It could be hanging from the ceiling. I mean, there's a lot of ways people use space in the classroom. Again, if you're doing this virtually, it's just it's a link in your that students can click to go to. So this is just another example. They are just showing different ways that it can be laid out. This example is showing how, because of the space, there's this, I don't remember what this was. This metal thing here was in the middle of their board, and they just had to be creative of how to get the information posted so students could have access to it. So you see they have the need to know, they have the calendar, they have the driving question. I mean, they have all these components for the wall. Here they had events and this was the only space they had to put everything together. So they had to get creative around the events so that they could still do it. So this brings up an important point. Let me go back to the list for the moment. So your project calendar, what goes up is just what are you doing that week? You don't put up everything. If it's a 4-week project, don't put up all 4 weeks. Put up the week that you're working on. And then when you get on to week 2, just add to that so they can see what's going on in week 2. And what it does is it helps students know what are the main things the main tasks that they have to do that week. Some people are really detailed, like to add lots of details, and others just say, we have this assessment, we have this team planning day, and that's all they have listed. And that's fine. Both work. Depends upon what your style with your class is. Checklists, rubrics, vocabulary wall, those only go up when you actually give them to the students. So if the students don't need a checklist or rubric till week 3, don't put it up in week 1. They're not going to pay attention to it. But when you give it to them in week 3, that's when it goes up on your project wall. And this is a way to keep everything transparent for kids. And if you do this, students should be able to, at any given time, if a guest asks, what's your driving question? What's your focus for your project? They should be able to look to where the driving question is, find it, and read it to the guest who asked that question. So these are just, again, these different examples. So please answer this question: why are PBL walls beneficial? Or what questions do you have about PBL walls? Let's take 10 seconds to reflect, and then please post your response.
I'd like to add something about PBL walls.
Yeah, go ahead.
In our school, I remember it made a lot of sense to post these PBL walls in the not in the classrooms, but outside the classroom, in the corridors, in the hallways, because it sets the whole atmosphere of PBL in the whole school. Whenever anyone passes any wall, they get some ideas, they can even post their feedback there.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks for bringing that up. That is another place to put it, is in the hallways. As Nurlan described, it just creates a culture that's powerful. Now, when you do that, it's also important that the driving question should also be inside the classroom, because they need to see that while they're learning, but the rest of it could be outside the classroom in the hallway. Yeah, and it's a constant reminder. It's something that the teachers refer to every day, because whatever the learning outcome is, so what happens is at the very beginning, each day you say, so today, our focus is on, this concept, and this is how it relates to the driving question. And you take about a 30-second soundbite to make that connection for the students, and it just sets the table for everything else. Now, let me just say, 30 seconds, like, wow, that seems like, can you really do it in such short time? 30 seconds of talk is about a half a page of a typewritten paper. So think about that. That's a lot of talk, and in 30 seconds. So it's very powerful in such a short amount of time. And then eventually you could say, so today our focus is on X, Y, and Z, and this is a driving question, and then ask the students to make the connection. And you can even do it at the end of the lesson that day, just as a reflection or review. There's lots of ways of using that driving question to help students connect the big picture with the immediate skills that they're working on. All right.
There's one question, and
Yeah.
I think I'll answer it myself. It's about
Go ahead.
The PBL wall. Вот Айгуль Казимова здесь написала: эта стена оформляется учителем или эта стена освещает все групповые работы? Эта стена оформляется детьми, вот группой именно. То есть каждая стена, которую Джон показал. John, could you please scroll through the examples, just through the photo examples of PBL walls?
Yeah.
Вот каждая стена — это один отдельный проект. То есть отдельная команда работает над проектом, им выделяется уголок какой-нибудь, часть стены в классе, может быть, либо часть стены в коридоре где-нибудь. В западных школах им разрешают, видите, везде клеить все. Я знаю, что в некоторых наших школах это запрещает, но поборитесь немножко за это. Мы это право отбороли у себя в школе в свое время. Именно право расписывать стены, украшать стены школы. То есть мы отошли от этого, от атмосферы поликлиники к атмосфере вот такой вот красочной школы. И вот каждая стена — это отдельный проект, и дети, вот видите, здесь сами уже креативят. То есть это вот такая достойная замена стенгазете. То есть ничего плохого о стенгазетах не говорю, но это что-то вроде стенгазеты, только побольше, и вот дети здесь раскрывают свой проект. Плюс это как бы заменять еще немножко рабочее пространство. Надеюсь, вот ответил на ваш вопрос. Yeah, I got the question answered, covered. I hope so. I just shared with some of our experience that we had in our school.
Yeah. No, it's great. No, thank you. That's what's valuable, when they can hear how it works in a school. So again, this is we're concluding this webinar. Of course, there will be time for questions. I just want to remind you that you have this yellow link that goes to the Google Doc that I showed at the beginning of today's session that has a lot of readings and resources for you. There's also the link here that gives you the bios and some of the resources of some of the presenters this week. And if you have any questions after today, please feel free to either email me. My email address is here, but also my Twitter handle is here. I always follow back teachers who follow me and I answer their questions. In fact, I believe one of the participants yesterday sent out a follow invite in Twitter, and I followed back. So always happy to support the work and growth for project-based learning in your schools.
Thank you, John. Thank you. was a very informative and productive week. And I was also, personally, I was happy to work with you again. Я бы тоже посоветовал, кстати, вот нашим слушателям сегодня, участникам, последить за статьями, которые Джон публикует на сайте Edutopia. How often do you publish articles on Edutopia?
It varies. I usually write somewhere between 3 to 4, sometimes 5 articles a year for Edutopia. And I write for some other places. The best way to see what I've published is when you go to my website here that's shown at the bottom. There's a link that says publications, and as I publish articles, they go up. So recently, I wrote a couple articles about virtual learning and how to prepare to teach in that way. And I wrote one for Edutopia, and I wrote one for Teacher Times in the UK. 2 different articles, so they're both available through the links.
Okay, we're by the way, we're also launching an article section on our own websites very soon. So if you have anything to share, we could translate it to Kazakh and Russian and post it on our website as well. Уважаемые участники, если у вас есть вопросы, какие-то комментарии, пока Джон с нами, еще пару минут советую не упускать его. Но пока мы ждем от вас комментарии, я бы хотел бы, давайте я лучше на английском расскажу. While we're waiting for the comments and questions, I would like to give an honorable mention to some of the unsung heroes of this week. Хасен Мирза, покажите себя, пожалуйста, если вы здесь с нами. Хасен Мирза, причешитесь и покажите себя. Ну-ка, включите камеру.
Так.
Okay, this is Mr. Hasan Jakenov. He was always with us on the backstage, preparing the YouTube feed, the Zoom links, organizing all the participants, sending lots of emails, replying to emails, listening to criticism from some of the organizers, from us, and so on. Хасен Мырза, сізге көп рахмет осы аптаны бізге, осы апта бойы бізбен бірге болғаныңыз үшін, за то, что нам помогали. Now I would like to invite, я не знаю, ну, пожалуйста, включите камеру, Динара, Асем. Я вас не слышу, если вы сможете. Вот. This is Asem. She's been translating. Асем, вы какой язык вели у нас? Не слышу, но по губам читаю русский, да, кажется? По губам прочитал. So Asem has been with us translating everything you said, John, into Russian simultaneously. I don't know how they do this.
They are amazing people. I know they're amazing at this.
I was always amazed every time I go to a conference. I just watch how the interpreters work, and I just can't grasp even the idea of how they do it. I mean, I don't know, maybe you have some two separate brains in your head. I don't know. I don't know.
Well, I know that I've done this way in different parts of the world, and what I love about this one is that it's so seamless that there's no break. Like, I can focus on sharing, and they just do an amazing job, an excellent job of doing the interpretation. So I deeply appreciate the work this team has done.
Yes, and Dinara, are you here as well? Dinara, if you could show yourself, because I'm seeing you for the first time, by the way. So glad to see you. And yeah, it was an honor to work with you. We don't have questions; we have comments. Just saying thank you, everyone. And yes, I say thank you for participating. Thank you for being with us.